What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Flight Risk, directed by Mel Gibson, starring Michelle Dockery, Mark Wahlberg, and Topher Grace, and I won't bury the lead. It's not a particularly good movie, however, strangely watchable and enjoyable on some level. My crowd was laughing. It was about half full. One person was audibly snoring. But when it comes to bad movies, there's a wide array of different kinds of bad movies out there. There's some of those movies that are just so dreary they induce you into a coma. That is not Flight Risk. There are some bad movies that are just endlessly kind of like sermonizing or hectoring or just kind of scolding the audience. It's not one of those kinds of movies. It's not bad like those movies that are just like creatively bankrupt, that are just like digging up the bones of the past and trying to make them feel fresh and new again. It's an original movie written by Jared Rosenberg, whose screenplay was added to the blacklist back in 2020. It's bad, I don't know, because it's just kind of like silly or weird, but it's kind of hard to pin down. But I think one of the reasons it's hard to pin down why it's so bad is that this is a movie directed by the guy who directed Braveheart. He directed friggin' Apocalypto. I just saw Apocalypto for the first time recently, and it blew my goddamn mind. It's one of the wildest fucking historical epics that I've ever seen, and it gets my highest possible recommendation. And Braveheart, I think I saw it 10,000 times back in the 1990s. And of course, Mel Gibson. I mean, I grew up on his movies. I saw Lethal Weapon, I don't know how many times, late night on HBO.
Fuck you, I'm jumping!
Do you really want to jump? Do you want to? Well, then that's fine with me. Come on, let's do it, asshole. Let's
Wait a
do
minute,
it.
what?
I want to.
Obviously, like the Mad Max trilogy. I mean, Mel Gibson is a living legend, and I'm thrilled to see that he's back in business. Like, he's a guy who's got nearly $500 million to his name, and yet he still feels compelled to direct this kind of down and dirty, schlocky little genre film for Lionsgate, and he must have felt drawn to the material some way, or maybe he just wanted to get some practice before directing his sequel to The Passion of the Christ. He's doing The Resurrection of the Christ in the very near future, which is a big passion project for him. I don't know if he's self-financing it or not, but The Passion made all the money in the world, and it looks like, he's returning to the Bible for additional material. So it's just bizarre that he would choose a movie that almost feels like a throwback to a different era. It feels like a late 90s movie that might star Johnny Depp or something like that, like before he became the big superstar from all those Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And the plot's pretty straightforward, and I'm assuming you've at least seen the trailer. I'm not going to offer a bunch of spoilers in terms of the twists and turns of the plot, but here's the basic premise. A pilot transports an air marshal accompanying a fugitive to trial as they cross the Alaskan wilderness. Tensions soar and trust is tested, as not everyone on board is who they seem. And if you just want to see a lean and mean little action thriller, Flight Risk does deliver the goods on that front. It's 91 minutes long. It's crazy how this weekend both Flight Risk as well as Presence are both very short movies. I've been complaining for years that most movies are way too long, but Flight Risk is 91 minutes and Presence is 85 minutes. I think Presence is a much better movie. But if you just want a nice trashy thriller that's pretty disposable and forgettable, it will get it done. I guess what really irritated me throughout the movie, or at least throughout the first half, was the accents, because Mark Wahlberg's character initially is pretending to be this kind of southern drawl Texan dude, and it's awful.
A number of passengers have left their lunch up here. I can open a snack bar.
And the reason I found it so irritating is that he is a hired gun. He's an assassin for the mob. He's supposed to kill Topher Grace before this marshal can get him back to testify. But the way he goes into disguise is by pretending to do an accent that he cannot do at all. It's like, well, that doesn't sound like a very convincing disguise for somebody whose job it is to kill people for a living, to kill people for money. Something tells me that you would be pretty, pretty good at assuming a certain identity that made you seem unsuspicious or nondescript so that you could just go about doing your job. Like, you wouldn't call attention to yourself doing the world's lamest Southern accent that anyone's ever heard. Mark Wahlberg has many talents. Doing Southern accents is not one of them. And so that was annoying. And then when he finally starts talking like Mark Wahlberg, then that problem more or less goes away.
Y'all need a pilot?
But then there's a problem with Michelle Dockery. I hope I'm saying her last name correctly, but Michelle Dockery, she's English. People might recognize her from the movie version of The Gentleman or shows like Downton Abbey. And she's like quintessentially English, but she's doing one of those really strange, comes kind of vapid, distant, like like unidentifiable American accents in this movie where it doesn't sound like she's American because she doesn't sound like she's from any particular part of the country. Like most Americans, like they sound like they're from New York or North Carolina or Texas or California or whatever, but they have like an accent where you say, oh, I bet that person's from Wisconsin. She just sounds like she's kind of dying inside every time she speaks, or like somebody gave her a sedative. It's like, just speak in your lovely English mode of speaking, and then if people ask you, like, how come you're a U.S. Marshal with an English accent? Say, oh, well, I lived in England until I was a teenager, then I moved to the USA, and I got obsessed with law enforcement. It could be just one of many throwaway lines as people are just shooting the shit in this plane up in the Alaskan wilderness. But in that she's the hero of the story and spends most of the movie either on her radio or on her cell phone trying to get instructions to how to land this plane. She's not a pilot, but when she kind of takes the pilot and like chains him up, she has to fly the plane herself. And she doesn't know how to do it, so she's constantly talking to people. But there's also like the plot is thickening behind the scenes in terms of who she can trust within her own department and her supervisors and that sort of thing. So she dominates most of the screenplay, and Topher Grace will occasionally have like his little witty one-liners. He's basically been playing the same part since the days of that 70s show, and even though he's like 50 years old now, he's still playing that same part. But I guess he's more or less, if you find him to be charming, you will find Topher Grace to be charming in Flight Risk. But I really struggle getting invested in a hero where every time they speak, I'm just not buying it. Like you're lovely to look at, you handle the action convincingly, you're tough as nails, blah, 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 but I don't believe a word that's coming out of your mouth. On the other hand, though, like I said at the beginning, it's strangely watchable. I think because it's so tight and so economical and so trashy in a lot of ways. Like a lot of the dialogue coming out of Mark Wahlberg's mouth, like this sounds like it was written by a 14-year-old child where no one ever slapped him on the hand for using coarse, vulgar language. I mean, it sounds truly juvenile at times, but it's shamelessly trashy, but at the same time, sincere. It's not tongue-in-cheek. It's not poking fun at the movie. It's not winking at the audience. The movie expects you to be invested, or at least you feel like the filmmakers were invested, and I feel like it's always a mistake. If you're going to make a down-and-dirty, low-budget genre film, don't make fun of the movie as you're making it. Make it with as much sincerity as possible. But one of the main reasons I was laughing periodically throughout the movie, I can't speak for anyone else, but people definitely were laughing. But Mark Wahlberg's character is so vulgar and so immature, you don't get the sense that he could fly a plane or drive a car or kill him. You don't get the sense that he could accomplish anything in life because he's so dysfunctional and so damaged and just so deranged. It just, I just found his whole approach to the assassination at hand to be unintentionally humorous or unintentionally comic. And meanwhile, you got the plane like careening through mountains and like, nearly colliding with mountain peaks and all that kind of stuff. And like, how are we going to land? When are we going to land? Like, are we going to run out of fuel? Blah, blah, blah. There's a million things going on to kind of keep you on the hook. And obviously you got the great Alaskan wilderness just looking fantastic. But on the whole, I would have to characterize the movie as kind of terrible, but mildly enjoyable. And I'm not really in the habit of watching movies where you kind of laugh at their expense. I know there are a lot of people out there who love watching bad movies like Cats, where there's like, oh my God, I cannot believe how bad it is. I do think there'll be an audience. I don't know if it'll be like one of those things where they think they're cool for laughing at Flight Risk, or if they'll just genuinely like it. But it has an undefinable or indefinable. Anyway, it has a certain quality that is undeniable, where it is easy to watch. I think people will watch it on airplanes, and like people will be having panic attacks watching all this chaos going on the back of people's chairs on airplanes. But I feel like it's perfect airplane viewing. Pure trash, very disposable, very forgettable. And I hope everybody got well paid, and I hope everybody had a blast making it. I don't know if Lionsgate's going to make any money with it. Lionsgate's been on a real serious cold streak as of late. They've made so many terrible movies. Like last year, they had The Crow and Borderlands. But whether you consider yourself a fan of Mel Gibson or Michelle Dockery or Mark Wahlberg or Topher Grace, nobody's going to say this is their best work. Like if you're a Topher Grace fan, it's probably due to a movie like Traffic or a show like that 70s show. Mark Wahlberg, I still think Boogie Nights, it will always be his best movie. But The Fighter was fantastic. I enjoyed him in The Departed, the Martin Scorsese film. Mark Wahlberg, obviously, he's got plenty of movies to his name. I just don't think that playing the villain in Flight Risk, anyway, I can't get over just how bizarre his characters are, like, and the reason and why they might have shaved his head like that. Like, I don't mind them turning like a bald guy into the villain, but it's like they were trying to intentionally make him seem ridiculous or silly looking as opposed to terrifying or intimidating. But anyway, this is not Mark Wahlberg's finest hour. Michelle Dockery, once again, I would recommend The Gentleman or obviously Downton Abbey. I only saw the first season of Downton Abbey because I was dating a girl at the time who was obsessed with it, so I felt obliged to watch it, but it's my mother's all-time favorite show, at least I believe it is. But anyway, I'm sure that she has plenty of fans out there who are going to be a little bewildered by her choice in movies. But Mel Gibson, both as an actor and as a director, he's got a lot of other movies to his name that are far more interesting than Flight Risk. I recently saw Gallipoli for the first time, directed by Peter Weir. That movie fucking rules. If you want to see a good old-fashioned historical epic about World War I, where a very young Mel Gibson is doing his thing, Gallipoli will 100% deliver. Obviously, you got the 3 Mad Max movies. I saw Beyond Thunderdome first and then discovered The Road Warrior and the original Mad Max later on. But yeah, you can watch those 3 movies on repeat the rest of your life and never get tired of them. The Bounty is fantastic. It's yet another version of Mutiny on the Bounty. And like every couple of decades, somebody has to do a version of Mutiny on the Bounty. But this time it's just called The Bounty, but it's got Daniel Day-Lewis and Anthony Hopkins. And everybody's like, damn your eyes, sir. And it's fucking delightful. Lethal Weapon, obviously one of the all-time great buddy movies, and I've lost track of how many times I've seen it. And I actually enjoy his Hamlet. I think his version of Hamlet might be the first movie of a Shakespeare adaptation on film that I ever saw. And in my class, I think I was in 8th grade at the time, we got extra credit if we went to see it in the theater and wrote a little report on it. So yeah, I saw Hamlet, and then it just kept playing on HBO over and over and over again. So every time it came on, I ended up watching it. But pretty goddamn good version of Hamlet. It's directed by Franco Zeffirelli. And then obviously throughout the 1990s, he was one of the highest paid movie stars in the world. But goddamn, there's no denying that he was on quite the hot streak there for a good long while, basically up through like the early 2000s with movies like The Patriot and Signs and things like that. And I don't want to oversimplify his scandal, but in spite of getting completely shit-faced and saying a lot of things which I will not repeat on this channel, he's continued to work. Every once in a while, he'll pop up in a movie which I find that I need to see. Like, what was that movie directed by? Dragged Across Concrete, directed by S. Craig Zahler, who did Bone Tomahawk and Brawl and Cell Block in 99. I feel like Dragged Across Concrete is the weakest of his 3 movies, but if you like S. Craig Zahler, yeah, Bone Tomahawk and Brawl and Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete are all worth seeing. Just Dragged Across Concrete had a few pacing problems. And when Mel Gibson finally makes The Resurrection of the Christ, I will go see it. I won't say that I'm the world's biggest fan of The Passion of the Christ. I was one and done, saw it in the theater, but I've never seen a crowd react quite like they did to The Passion. There was this one girl who was just sobbing and dry heaving and just crying inconsolably into her boyfriend's armpit like the entire movie. So she was getting an emotional response. And there was this old guy who tried to get up and leave, who like collapsed and just was like thrashing about in the aisle between all the seats at one point. I was like, what is going on? Like, people are losing their goddamn minds, having like a real getting a real physical jolt from the movie. I saw that movie 20 years ago. At this point, I only remember a few certain scenes, like with the cat of nine tails when his ribs come out and that sort of thing. I mean, in terms of like violence and so on and so forth, it definitely delivered. But Mel Gibson is a very outspoken, devout Catholic, and he's very into that story, so I wish him the best of luck with The Resurrection. I will go see it, but I just wish he would give us one more cool historical epic. Like Hacksaw Ridge is not on the level of Apocalypto or Braveheart, but it's still a cool World War II movie. I can't handle the accent, Andrew Garfield. As you can tell from both this review of Flight Risk as well as my reaction to Hacksaw Ridge, I can't stand it when people do an accent that's not convincing. Like Daniel Day-Lewis can do a fake accent, or Gary Oldman can do a fake accent. Some actors can pull it off, and some actors can't. And if they can't pull it off, it ruins the whole movie. And so I really struggle with Andrew Garfield and Hacksaw Ridge. Like just talk like Andrew Garfield, talk like Peter Parker, and the whole movie would be totally fine. But getting back to Flight Risk, I'll just say this. If the trailer got your interest, you will probably enjoy the movie. But the best recommendation for it I can give is if you and your friends are out on the town and you've had a few drinks and you're like, fuck it, let's go to the movies. What do you want to see? Like whatever starts next and looks good, then you might be in the frame of mind to get on its wavelength and get into the spirit of things. But when Mel Gibson moves on to filmmaker heaven, 15, 20, 25 years from now, it's not going to be listed at the top of his finest achievements. It's either a filmmaker or as an actor, but that's all right. I'm just glad to see Mel Gibson back in action, and I hope he won't make us wait long for his next movie. But I think that might be it. I don't know if I've got anything else to say about this movie, apart from just recommending a bunch of other movies that are not Flight Risk. But I hope you enjoyed my review. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. Hope everybody has a great weekend. And more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.